The wind rolled over the open plains like a restless spirit, carrying with it the dust of 1,000 forgotten trails. The cowboy sat high in the saddle, his hat brim pulled low, eyes fixed on the horizon where the last streaks of sunlight kissed the earth. His horse, a steady old gelding, breath deep and slow, every step deliberate as if it, too, felt the weight of the journey. He had been riding for hours when he finally spotted the cabin, a modest place, built from rough-hewn logs and stubborn grit, standing alone against the sweep of wilderness. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, and the faint glimmer of lamplight showed through the single front window. The cowboy tugged on his reins, his jaw tightening. This was where his road had led him, though he had not decided yet if he was ready for what waited inside. When he swung down from the saddle, boots crunching against the dirt, the door creaked open. She stepped out, her figure framed in the glow of the lamplight. Her hair was tied back, her jacket dusty from long days of labor. She didn't look startled to see him. In truth, she seemed to have been waiting. The cowboy tipped his hat, silent for a long moment before answering. "Reckon I did." There was a pause between them, a silence heavy with unspoken history. She searched his face, as though trying to measure the weight of the man standing before her. Then, with a sudden honesty that startled even herself, she whispered, "I'm not a virgin." The words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable, breaking the stillness of the night. She expected judgment, the tightening of his jaw, the quick dismissal that had shadowed her before. But the cowboy only stepped closer, his gaze calm and steady, the lantern light reflecting in the dark depths of his eyes. His palm was calloused, warm, and grounding as it closed around hers. "I never asked you to be," he said. The simplicity of it struck her harder than any elaborate promise could. For a long heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still, the cabin, the plains, the weary stars above all of it fading as she felt the truth in his words. No judgment, no expectation, just a hand, steady as the land beneath their feet. Her throat tightened. She had faced cruelty before, men who saw only what they could take. But this man, this cowboy, saw her differently. Not as a broken past, but as something worth standing beside. And in that moment, though neither spoke another word, an unspoken bond was forged, one that would be tested by the dangers waiting just beyond the cabin walls. Inside the cabin, the fire cracked softly in the stone hearth, filling the room with a warmth that neither of them spoke about but both felt. The cowboy removed his hat, setting it gently on the table, the dust of miles clinging to its brim. He stood tall but not imposing, his presence steady, like an oak that had weathered storms without breaking. She busied herself with the kettle, though her hands trembled faintly. Pouring water into tin cups gave her an excuse not to meet his eyes. "It's been a long time," she murmured, the steam rising between them. "Too long," he replied, his voice low, gravel carrying memory. He took the cup she offered, their fingers brushing. That fleeting touch was small, yet it lingered in both of their minds. Silence followed again, but it wasn't empty, it was thick, weighted with questions left unsaid. Finally, she broke it. "You didn't flinch," she said, her tone almost accusing. "When I told you outside, most men would've." His gaze held hers, firm and unyielding. "What a woman has walked through don't define her worth," he said. "I ain't looking at where you been. I'm looking at who's standing right in front of me." Her breath caught, and she turned away quickly, eyes stinging with a sudden rush of emotion. For years she had carried the weight of judgment like a chain, every whisper of gossip, every sneer reminding her of scars she could never erase. And now, here was this man, steady as the mountain ridges outside, refusing to see her as anything but whole. "You make it sound simple," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Truth usually is," he answered. She laughed faintly, a laugh that was more a release of tension than amusement. When she finally looked back at him, her expression had softened. "I don't know why you came," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "But I'm glad you did." The cowboy didn't smile, but his eyes told her enough. He had come because something about her, something unspoken, called to him stronger than the loneliness of the trail. A gust of wind rattled the shutters, reminding them both that the outside world hadn't vanished. Trouble was out there, circling like coyotes in the dark. He felt it in his bones, and though the moment between them was fragile and tender, he knew it couldn't last forever. Still, as the fire burned low, he reached across the table, his hand brushing hers again, deliberate this time. She didn't pull away. Outside, the night was vast and silent, but inside that cabin, a quiet promise was being written, one that would bind them together. Against whatever, storms were waiting on the horizon. Dawn came slow, spilling gold across the horizon and pushing the night back into memory. The air was sharp with morning chill, and every sound the call of a crow, the rustle of brush carried farther than it should. He was listening, not just with his ears but with the instinct of a man who had survived long trails and longer nights. Trouble was out there. He could feel it. Inside, she moved quietly about the cabin, stirring the coals back to life, preparing bread and coffee. But even in those simple motions, her eyes drifted to the window, drawn to the sight of him sitting like a sentinel against the rising sun. Something about his stillness reassured her, though a small knot of worry tightened in her chest. When she finally stepped outside, he glanced at her, then back to the tree line in the distance. "We ain't alone," he said softly. Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Tracks, fresh, 3, maybe for men, ridden hard last night. Passed near here." He tapped the rifle stock gently. "Could be drifters, could be worse." A shadow flickered in her expression. "You think they'll come here?" The cowboy rose, his height casting a long figure against the light. "If they know you're here alone, maybe. If they think I'm passing through, maybe not. Either way, I aim to be ready." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of what might be coming. She looked at him, her voice unsteady. "Why stay? You could ride on, leave this behind." His jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. "Because some things ain't meant to be left behind." The words settled deep inside her, stirring something she thought had long been buried hope. She nodded faintly, fighting the sting of tears. For years she had fought battles alone, but now, for the first time, she didn't feel abandoned. The day moved slow, every sound outside the cabin magnified, every creak of the wood like a whisper of warning. As night drew closer, the air grew colder, the silence heavier. The cowboy stood watch again, this time with both lanterns extinguished, the cabin swallowed by shadow. And when a distant horse's whinny cut through the night air, sharp and clear, they both knew the trouble he had felt in his bones was riding closer. The night pressed in thick, broken only by the restless stamping of the cowboy's horse tied out, back and the faint sigh of wind. Against the trees, the cabin lay in darkness, its fire smothered to ash, but inside, two hearts beat quick against the silence. The cowboy moved with deliberate calm, loading his rifle in the shadows, every click of metal against wood steady, sure. Then came the voices, low, rough, carried by the wind. She tensed, fingers gripping the edge of the windowsill until her knuckles went white. From the darkness, lanterns flickered 3, no, for riders moving between the trees, their laughter harsh and careless. "They found us," she whispered, her voice cracking. The cowboy's hand came down gently on her shoulder. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice quiet but unshakable. "Fear won't help. Keep still. Keep low." She nodded, though her chest burned with panic. One of them, tall and broad, barked out a command. "Cabin's lit last night. Someone's in there. Check it." Her eyes shot to the cowboy's, searching for some sign of what he planned. His expression gave nothing away but resolve. He pulled her toward the corner of the cabin, placing her where the shadows ran deepest. "Stay here," he whispered, "no matter what." Her throat tightened. "And you?" He gave a faint smile, though his eyes were hard. "I'll handle what needs handlin'." The door rattled under the first heavy knock. "Open up," one of the men shouted. "Ain't looking for trouble, just want a drink and a fire." His voice carried, calm yet firm. "Cabin's taken. Best you move along." A pause, then laughter, cruel and sharp. "Hear that, boys? Man thinks he can tell us where to ride." Boots stumped closer, the wooden door groaning under the weight of their push. But through her fear, she watched him unmoving, unflinching, a figure of iron in the doorway. And though danger pressed close, she realized something in that moment. He wasn't just fighting to protect a cabin. He was standing to protect her, as if her life and dignity were worth more than his own. Outside, the riders readied themselves. Inside, the fire that had begun between them burned brighter than fear.